Tim Richmond did not leave NASCAR with a farewell ceremony. There was no final parade lap, no grand tribute from the sport, and no public goodbye from the people who had once crowded around him in victory lane. His story ended quietly in a hospital room in West Palm Beach, Florida. In the early hours of August 13, 1989, Richmond telephoned his mother and asked her to come. She arrived shortly after 5 in the morning. At 5:12 a.m., Timothy Lee Richmond was gone. He was only 34. News of his death moved through NASCAR, but the response was strangely muted. The next race did not become a memorial. His hometown newspaper struggled even to identify the funeral home responsible for his burial, because every funeral home in Ashland, Ohio, denied handling the arrangements. NASCAR's official history later reduced him to a brief mention and included no photograph. Years afterward, a merchandise seller at Pocono Raceway claimed not to recognize his name, even though Richmond had won there 4 times. That disappearance from public memory was difficult to reconcile with who he had been only a few seasons earlier. In 1986, Tim Richmond was arguably the most exciting driver in American stock car racing. He won 7 Cup races, earned more pole positions than anyone else, and shared Driver of the Year honors with Dale Earnhardt. His red and gold Folgers Chevrolet became one of the defining images of the season. Richmond was fast, theatrical, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. He entered victory lane in expensive clothes, smiled for cameras, and carried himself less like a traditional NASCAR driver than a celebrity who happened to race cars. Then his presence vanished. First came reports of severe pneumonia. Later came a drug testing controversy, a suspension, a lawsuit, and months of secrecy. Finally, his death certificate identified the truth that almost everyone around the sport had avoided discussing. Richmond had AIDS. His life became more than a racing story. It became a story about fear, stigma, institutional power, and the ease with which a sport can distance itself from someone once that person becomes inconvenient. To understand why Tim Richmond seemed so unusual in NASCAR, it helps to begin far from the racetrack. He grew up in Ashland, Ohio, in a wealthy family. His father, Al Richmond, developed machinery capable of boring pipes beneath highways without opening large trenches. The invention became the foundation of a successful international manufacturing business. Tim's childhood looked nothing like the hard, working-class beginnings associated with many NASCAR stars. He learned to fly while still a teenager and received extravagant gifts that included a Trans Am, a boat, and an airplane. His family sent him to Miami Military Academy in Florida. There he became a gifted athlete, set a conference record in the high hurdles, played quarterback on a championship football team, and eventually had his jersey retired. Racing was not originally the plan. His path into motorsports began almost accidentally in 1976. A friend of his father helped operate a sprint car, and Tim joined the crew. During a test at Lakeville Speedway, he was allowed to drive a few laps. Someone timed him. To everyone's surprise, his laps were quicker than those of the regular driver. His father bought him a race car, although the first attempt did not go well. Tim spun during his first competition and damaged the car. Al Richmond briefly removed him from the driver's seat. The following year, however, Tim moved into a super-modified that better suited his instincts. At Sandusky Speedway in 1977, he won both Rookie of the Year and the track championship. From that point forward, his rise was rapid. He earned rookie honors in sprint cars, won in Formula Super V, and eventually attracted attention from Roger Penske's organization. That opportunity took him to the 1980 Indianapolis 500. At Indianapolis, Richmond immediately demonstrated the raw speed that would define his career. During practice, he recorded the fastest unofficial speed of the month, even exceeding the pace of race favorite Johnny Rutherford. He started 19th, but ranked among the fastest qualifiers overall. In the race, he ran near the front, led a lap, and finished 9th in his first appearance. The most famous image came after the checker flag. Richmond's car ran out of fuel on the front stretch. While he sat stranded, race winner Johnny Rutherford pulled alongside and signaled for him to climb aboard. Richmond sat on the side of Rutherford's winning car and rode into victory lane with the champion. The photograph became one of the enduring images of Indianapolis, the established winner and the young rookie sharing the same car. It also captured Richmond's strange gift for remaining at the center of the scene, even after something had gone wrong. Open-wheel racing offered speed, but it also brought repeated crashes. A conversation with Pocono Raceway President Joseph Mattioli encouraged Richmond to consider stock cars. Richmond later described the difference in simple terms. An Indy car was something he drove, while a stock car was something he raced. He made his NASCAR Cup debut at Pocono in 1980. The next season, he competed for several organizations, showing speed without having the stable equipment or team structure needed to turn that speed into consistent results. The breakthrough arrived in 1982, driving for J.D. Stacy and working with legendary crew chief Dale Inman. Richmond won his first Cup race at Riverside International Raceway. He later won the second Riverside event that season as well. His performance on road courses surprised even experienced observers. Benny Parsons watched Richmond through Riverside's demanding corners and described what he saw as extraordinary. By the end of the season, Richmond had 2 victories, 8 poles, and 7 top 5 finishes in 26 starts. From 1983 through 1985, Richmond drove the number 27 Old Milwaukee Pontiac for Raymond Beadle's Blue Max team. He typically won once a season, remained near the top 10 in the points, and built a loyal fan following. Yet his personality continued to separate him from NASCAR's traditional culture. The sport's leading figures seemed to represent recognizable types. Richard Petty carried the image of Southern racing royalty. Dale Earnhardt projected toughness, denim, and working-class intensity. NASCAR had emerged from the rural South, and much of its identity still reflected that history. Richmond arrived from Ohio with family money, private airplanes, designer clothes, celebrity friends, and a taste for nightlife. He once responded to a suggestion that he improve his appearance by appearing at Daytona in a silk outfit and carrying cane. He appeared in the Burt Reynolds film Stroker Ace, visited New York for fashionable haircuts, joked with fans, and embraced the nickname Hollywood. Many people in the garage considered him strange. Petty saw something else. Petty believed Richmond could attract younger viewers and become the kind of personality capable of carrying NASCAR into a new era. That possibility became real in 1986. Rick Hinder placed Richmond in the number 25 Folgers Chevrolet and paired him with veteran crew chief Harry Hyde. On paper, the combination offered enormous potential. In practice, the relationship began with conflict. Hyde was a World War II veteran from Kentucky who had spent decades building and managing race cars. He had won a championship with Bobby Isaac and believed in patience, tire conservation, mechanical sympathy, and preparing the car for the final stage of a 500-mile race. Richmond wanted speed immediately. Hyde later admitted that he could barely tolerate Richmond during the early months of the season. The driver resisted instruction and attacked every lap as though it were qualifying. Hyde tried to explain tire wear, brake fade, gearbox stress, and the importance of preserving equipment. Richmond heard caution where Hyde intended strategy. The turning point came during a test at North Wilkesboro. Hyde asked Richmond to run 50 laps in his usual aggressive style, followed by another 50 laps using Hyde's method. When the 2 sets of tires were compared, the difference was obvious. The first set was badly worn. The second remained far healthier. Richmond finally understood. Once the 2 men began working together rather than fighting one another, the season changed. Richmond entered 1986 without a victory in 64 consecutive starts. He failed to win any of the first 12 races over the final 17 events. However, he became nearly unstoppable. He won 7 races, including both Pocono events, the Daytona Summer Race, the Southern 500 at Darlington, and a season finale at Riverside. He also led the series in pole positions. One Pocono victory became a perfect example of his style. After early contact with Richard Petty cost him a lap, Richmond recovered, returned to the lead battle, and won a 3-wide finish by approximately 0.05 of a second. Over the radio, he celebrated it as exactly the kind of finish NASCAR was supposed to produce. Darlington carried even greater meaning. The Southern 500 was one of sport's most prestigious in punishing races. The rough surface destroyed tires, the narrow track punished mistakes, and the race demanded discipline. Richmond survived while Bill Elliott, one of the season's strongest drivers, hit the wall. Richmond took the victory and climbed onto the car afterward, visibly enjoying the moment. Despite the late-season surge, he finished third in the championship behind Dale Earnhardt. The early season struggles had created too large a deficit. Only 6 points separated Richmond from second place. The obvious question has never disappeared. What would have happened if Richmond and Hyde had solved their differences at the beginning of the year? By the final months of that season, another question was becoming more urgent. People close to Richmond noticed that he looked ill. Harry Hyde saw changes in his face and eyes. Richmond frequently took antibiotics and appeared increasingly exhausted. At NASCAR's awards banquet in New York on December 5, 1986, he looked pale and perspired heavily. Ubby Wheeler, president of Charlotte Motor Speedway, remembered being disturbed by his appearance. Richmond said he was simply tired. The following day, a California physician contacted him about test results from an earlier visit for a persistent cold. Richmond returned to Ohio and entered the Cleveland Clinic under an assumed name. Doctors diagnosed pneumocystis pneumonia, a serious infection usually found in people with severely damaged immune systems. The underlying cause was HIV. Richmond had AIDS. He spent Christmas in a hospital and lost more than 20 pounds. An AIDS diagnosis in late 1986 carried consequences far beyond the medical condition itself. Effective treatment did not exist. AZT would not receive approval until March 1987, and even then it offered limited benefit as a single medication. Many patients survived only a short time after diagnosis. Public understanding was shaped by fear and prejudice. AIDS was widely associated with gay men and intravenous drug users. Many Americans treated the illness as evidence of moral failure rather than a medical crisis. NASCAR's conservative environment was especially unprepared to respond. Richmond and those closest to him constructed a public explanation based on double pneumonia. The description was technically accurate, but it concealed the reason his immune system had collapsed. Only a small number of people knew the full diagnosis. Among them were physician and broadcaster Dr. Jerry Punch, Rick Hendrick, and a few others. Most of the garage heard only that Richmond had pneumonia. He missed the first 11 races of 1987. Benny Parsons drove the Hendrick car in his absence. An early test at Rockingham confirmed that Richmond did not yet have enough strength to race. Then, in June, he returned at Pocono. The comeback became one of the most emotional victories in NASCAR history. Richmond took the lead within the opening laps and controlled much of the race. A gearbox problem eventually left him with only fourth gear. Yet he continued and defeated Bill Elliott by several car lengths. After the finish, Richmond could barely contain himself. He cried repeatedly as people congratulated him. In victory lane, he embraced his mother and waved the towel above his head. Members of the team later described the moment as almost impossible to surpass. 1 week later at Riverside, Richmond won again. He held off Ricky Rudd and dedicated the Father's Day victory to his father. It became the 13th and final win of his Cup career. Richmond attempted several more races, but his health continued to decline. At Michigan in August 1987, he had to be driven from his motorhome to the car. He qualified and finished 29th after engine failure. NASCAR officials informed Hendrick that Richmond did not appear physically capable of continuing. In September, Richmond resigned from Hendrick Motorsports so the team could hire a full-time driver for the next season. He moved to Florida and largely disappeared from public view. The following year produced the most controversial chapter of the story. In January 1988, NASCAR introduced its first formal substance abuse policy. Officials publicly acknowledged that concerns surrounding Richmond had influenced the creation of the program. He became the first driver tested under the new system, and for a long period, apparently the only active driver subjected to it. Richmond still hoped to return. He arranged a car with owner Ken Reagan and went to Daytona for the Busch Clash. Because he expected a drug test, Richmond stopped taking AZT for approximately 6 weeks. He feared that his medication might appear in the test and reveal his condition. Before submitting NASCAR sample, he had his own physician conduct an independent screening. That test was negative and the sample was preserved. On February 4th, 1988, Richmond submitted urine to NASCAR. 2 days later, the organization suspended him indefinitely, claiming the presence of amphetamines and opiates. Later investigations raised serious doubts about that result. According to testimony and reporting that emerged from sealed legal records, the initial laboratory screening was negative. Additional tests were also negative. A more detailed analysis identified pseudoephedrine and ibuprofen, common ingredients associated with over-the-counter cold medicine. No illegal drug was found. Nevertheless, NASCAR announced a positive result. Several days later, the organization acknowledged that the detected substances were ordinary, non-prescription medications. Richmond passed another test. Still, NASCAR did not restore him automatically. Instead, officials demanded access to his complete medical records from the Cleveland Clinic. Those records contained his AIDS diagnosis. Richmond refused to surrender them. He hired attorney Barry Slotnick and filed a $20 million lawsuit against NASCAR officials and medical personnel involved in the testing program. NASCAR responded by seeking years of tax returns, medical appointments, laboratory records, and bodily fluid tests. Lawyers questioned Richmond's friends in search of evidence that he used drugs. Several allegations later suggested that NASCAR's drug policy may have been shaped specifically to remove him. Some of those claims came from people with personal conflicts and therefore require caution. But key details were supported by more than one source. The most important admission came from NASCAR President Bill France Jr. himself. Years later, while discussing the case on camera, France acknowledged that the test had been mishandled and said that NASCAR had taken Richmond out. Richmond never raced again. During the legal battle, he hired an airplane to fly over Daytona International Speedway with a banner telling fans that he missed them. The lawsuit was settled privately in January 1989. By then, Richmond's physical condition made a return impossible. The 6-week interruption of AZT remained one of the darkest consequences of the testing controversy. Richmond had stopped treatment in order to avoid exposing his diagnosis, only to fail a test that laboratory evidence reportedly showed as negative. It is impossible to know exactly how much the interruption shortened his life, but people close to the case believe it likely harmed him. As his illness advanced, Richmond withdrew into a condominium in Florida with his mother. Very few members of the NASCAR community visited. Rick Hendrick remained supportive. Dr. Jerry Punch came to see him. A.J. Foyt was among the rare racing figures who appear in person. Most stayed away. Kyle Petty later spoke candidly about the reason. The racing world did not understand AIDS, and fear shaped its behavior. In a sport that was slow to accept unfamiliar realities, Richmond's diagnosis became something many people preferred not to confront. His sister, Sandra Welch, described him spending long periods alone in a dark bedroom with the blinds closed. He was not only depressed, he was furious at the disease, at God, at the loss of his career, and at the way people treated him. The social stigma was not a secondary problem. It became part of the illness itself. In July 1989, ESPN broadcast a race from Pocono and assembled footage of Richmond's 1986 victory for him to watch in a hospital. When staff members saw the images of the charismatic driver surrounded by teammates and celebrating in victory lane, several began to cry. The healthy, energetic man on the screen barely resembled the patient they were caring for. Less than a month later, he died. Richmond's death certificate listed cardiopulmonary arrest, gastrointestinal hemorrhaging, and AIDS. His burial took place privately at Ashland County Memorial Park in Ohio. He had requested that members of the racing community not attend. 10 days after his death, the family publicly confirmed that he had died from complications of AIDS and stated that he had contracted HIV through heterosexual contact. They hoped that speaking openly might prevent others from experiencing the same secrecy and suffering. Inside NASCAR, Some immediate reactions focused on suspicion rather than sympathy. Several drivers publicly suggested drug use. Their comments reflected both the rumors already surrounding Richmond and a deeper unwillingness to accept that a heterosexual man could contract HIV through sex. Dr. Jerry Punch later helped arrange HIV testing for dozens of people connected to the traveling NASCAR community. Afterward, the sport did little to preserve Richmond's memory. Other drivers who died young became subjects of tributes, memorials, and merchandise. Richmond largely vanished from NASCAR's official story. His achievements remained in the statistics, but the man himself was treated as though remembering him too clearly would force the sport to revisit uncomfortable decisions. Recognition returned slowly. In 1998, NASCAR included Richmond among its 50 greatest drivers. He entered the International Motorsport Hall of Fame in 2002. In 2010, an ESPN documentary introduced his complete story to a new generation, including the illness, the drug test, the lawsuit, the institutional silence, and recollections of those who knew him. The documentary also restored attention to a point repeatedly made by racing professionals. Richmond possessed extraordinary natural ability. Larry McReynolds, who worked with numerous major NASCAR stars, described him as the most naturally talented driver he had ever seen. Carl Petty believed the balance of power in the 1990s would have looked very different had Richmond survived. Rick Hendrick continued to wonder how many championships might have followed. Yet Richmond has never appeared on a NASCAR Hall of Fame ballot. He is recognized on NASCAR's list of both the 50 and 75 greatest drivers, but he has neither been inducted nor formally nominated. Fans continue to campaign for his inclusion. His presence survives in less official ways. Hendrick Motorsports has honored his paint schemes. Merchandise carries his image again. Fans preserve race footage and retell his story. People who watched him still remember the speed, the confidence, and the sense that every race could turn into a spectacle whenever he was near the front. A former Hendrick team manager, Jimmy Johnson, maintained a private ritual for years. Each January, he opened his new calendar to August 13th and wrote a simple note marking the exact time of Richmond's death. That small act may say more about Richmond's legacy than any official ceremony. His record was impressive: 13 victories and 14 poles in 185 Cup starts. His 1986 season was one of the strongest campaigns of the decade. His 2 wins, after returning from a life-threatening illness in 1987, remain among the most remarkable performances in motorsports. But the deeper significance of his life lies elsewhere. Tim Richmond's story shows how quickly public admiration can turn into avoidance when illness carries social shame. It shows how an institution can protect itself by reducing a complicated person to rumor. It shows how official memory is shaped not only by achievement, but by whether remembering someone creates discomfort. In the late 1980s, AIDS often threatened more than a person's health. It could destroy reputation, isolate families, end careers, and alter how history recorded a life. Richmond was not forgotten because he lacked talent. He was forgotten because remembering him honestly would have required NASCAR to confront fear, prejudice, and the possibility that it had helped drive a dying man out of sport. The silence has weakened with time. The races still exist. The photographs still exist. The people who witnessed his talent have continued to speak. A new generation now knows that the glamorous figure in the Folger Chevrolet was not merely a reckless celebrity or the subject of a drug rumor. He was one of the fastest drivers of his era. He was a championship-level talent. He returned from the hospital and won at Pocono while using only 1 gear. He crossed the finish line in tears because he understood how much had been taken from him and how uncertain the future had become. For years, NASCAR allowed that story to fade. It's coming back now, and the more clearly it is told, the harder Tim Richmond becomes to erase.